Remove and replace parts for the HP EliteBook X G2i 14-inch notebook next-gen AI PC. Before replacing any parts, ensure the computer is prepared for disassembly. Turn off the computer. Disconnect the power cord and any external devices. How to replace the base enclosure. Tools for the task: screwdriver and flat-bladed pry tool. Removal: loosen the 4 captive Phillips head screws that secure the base enclosure. Carefully separate the edges of the base enclosure. And remove. Replacement: place the base enclosure into position. Apply pressure along the edges to reattach the base enclosure. Tighten the 4 captive Phillips head screws that secure the base enclosure. How to replace the battery. Tools for the task: screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure. Removal: warning! To avoid personal injury and damage to the product, use extreme care not to puncture, twist, or crack the battery. An internal puncture or rupture to the battery has the potential to cause a short, which may result in a thermal event. Disconnect the battery cable from the system board. Remove the 2 Phillips screws that secure the battery. Remove the battery. Replacement: place the battery into position. Replace the 2 Phillips screws that secure the battery. Reconnect the battery cable to the system board. How to replace the M.2 SSD. Tools for the task: screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and disconnect the battery. Removal: remove the Phillips screw that secures the M.2 SSD. Grasp the M.2 SSD by the edges and remove. Replacement: align the notches in the M.2 SSD with the notches on the connector. At an angle, insert the M.2 SSD. Replace the Phillips screw that secures the M.2 SSD. How to replace the speakers. Tools for the task: screwdriver and flat-bladed pry tool. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and disconnect the battery. Removal: disconnect the left speaker cable from its connector on the system board. Remove the 4 Phillips screws that secure the left speaker. Use a flat-bladed pry tool to lift part of the speaker from the adhesive securing it. Lift the left speaker and remove. The right speaker is removed in the same manner. Replacement: place the right speaker into position. Replace the 4 Phillips screws that secure the right speaker. Connect the right speaker cable to its connector on the system board. The left speaker is replaced in the same manner. How to replace the heatsink and fans. Tools for the task: screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure and disconnect the battery. Removal: Noting their orientation for replacement, disconnect the fan cables. Remove the Phillips screw securing the fans. Loosen the 4 captive Phillips screws. The heatsink has numbers adjacent to the following 4 screws. Loosen the 4 captive Phillips screws that secure the heatsink in numerical order. Lift the heatsink and remove. Due to the adhesive quality of the thermal grease located between the heatsink and processor components, it may be necessary to move the heatsink from side to side to detach it from the system board. Replacement. Before replacing the heatsink, the thermal grease should be replaced. The thermal grease should be replaced every time the heatsink is removed. Use alcohol and a soft cloth or an alcohol swab to clean all thermal grease off of the processor and heatsink. According to the individual specifications for your particular processor, apply new thermal grease to the processor. Place the heatsink into position on the system board. Tighten the 4 captive Phillips screws that secure the heatsink in numerical order. Tighten the 4 captive Phillips screws. Replace the Phillips screw securing the fans. Noting their orientation from removal, connect the fan cables. How to replace the system board. Tools for the task: flat-bladed pry tool and tweezers. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, M.2 SSD, and heatsink and fans. Removal. Disconnect the speaker and touchpad cables from the system board. Remove the 3 Phillips screws securing the left bracket. Remove the left bracket. Remove the 5 Phillips screws securing the right bracket. Remove the right bracket. Disconnect all cables from the system board. Caution: use care when disconnecting the wireless antenna cables. A damaged cable or connector can degrade performance. Remove the plastic cover from the wireless antenna connectors. Disconnect the wireless antenna cables. Remove the 2 Phillips screws that secure the system board to the top cover. Remove the 7 Phillips screws that secure the system board to the top cover. Remove the Phillips screw with the spacer that secures the system board to the top cover. Lift the system board out of the cutouts and rotate up to expose the cables underneath. Lift the locking bar on the ZIF connectors and remove the cables. Remove the system board. Replacement. Place the system board into position. Reconnect the ZIF connector cables and press the locking bar down to lock the cables into place. Rotate the system board down and slide it into the cutouts in the top cover. Ensure no cables are pinched between the system board and top cover. Replace the Phillips screw with the spacer that secures the system board to the top cover. Replace the 7 Phillips screws that secure the system board to the top cover. Replace the 2 Phillips screws that secure the system board to the top cover. Caution: use care when connecting the wireless antenna cables. A damaged cable or connector can degrade performance. Reconnect the wireless antenna cables. Replace the plastic cover over the wireless antenna connectors. Reconnect the cables to the system board. Replace the right bracket. Replace the 5 Phillips screws securing the right bracket. Replace the left bracket. Replace the 3 Phillips screws securing the left bracket. Reconnect the speaker and touchpad cables to the system board. How to replace the power button. Tools for the task: screwdriver, Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, M.2 SSD, and heatsink and fans. Removal. Noting its orientation for replacement, carefully lift the power button ribbon cable from the adhesive securing it to the top cover. Remove the 2 Phillips screws that secure the power button to the top cover. Remove the power button. Replacement. Place the power button into position. Replace the 2 Phillips screws that secure the power button to the top cover. Noting its orientation from removal, press down on the power button ribbon cable to adhere it to the top cover. How to replace the top cover. Tools for the task. Screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the base enclosure, battery, M.2 SSD, speakers, heatsink and fans, and power button. Removal. Open the notebook so that the keyboard and display are resting flat. Remove the 3 Phillips screws from the right hinge. Remove the 3 Phillips screws from the left hinge. Noting any cable routing for replacement, lift the display panel off of the top cover and remove the top cover. Replacement. If installing a new top cover, remove all components from the old top cover and install them onto the new top cover. With the hinges fully open, slide the top cover into position under the display panel. Reroute any cabling, ensuring no cables are pinched. Replace the 3 Phillips screws to the left hinge. Replace the 3 Phillips screws to the right hinge.